morning, everybody. My name is Terry. I'm one of the pastors here, and if it's your first time, welcome. We're really excited that you decided to be a part of our church this morning as we embark on a new message series entitled Tribes, and we had a lot of fun putting that bumper video together. And let me tell you where we're going to go for the next few weeks. Today, first of all, is a very different Sunday, as you can tell by this setup, because we're going to introduce Tribes in a very unique way. But Tribes speaks to the idea that, and if you don't want to come to the series, you just want to sleep for the next 3 weeks, fine, I'll give you the end of the message. But the bottom line is that we were all, as followers of Jesus, designed to do life in community. We were designed to live our faith in community. And as we talk about tribes, we're talking about this idea that maybe, just maybe, it's not our American idealism, it's not the way in which we think about our individuality, but maybe the Christian life was meant to always be in the context of a tribe. And we're going to open that up and we're going to talk more about that because tribes can absolutely have a dynamic effect if you know what a tribe is and you know how to be a part of that. We're going to unpack that over the course of the next 3 weeks. But today is different because today we're going to introduce tribes through a report about a trip that myself, Pastor Jim, Hope Anderson, who's one of our leaders, and 7 incredible teenagers took to the country of Bulgaria in Eastern Europe. Now, what's exciting about that is because we're going to teach the lesson of tribes through their experience. And to kick this off, we're going to go to our anchor passage that I'm going to unpack next week, but I'm going to lay the groundwork right now for us. Because Jesus Christ, He died on a cross for yours and my sin. He rose from the dead, beat death. And then as He did so, then He created an alternative, a path for us, which is eternity. And then many individuals are skeptical because they wonder, did Jesus really rise from the dead? Are you sure the disciples didn't steal His body? I mean, how do we know for sure? Well, if you're new to Christianity, or maybe you're a skeptic, or maybe you're not a Christian, you need to know this. You probably don't know that. Do you know there's hundreds and hundreds of testimonies of individuals who saw Jesus walking the earth after His resurrection? We have eyewitness accounts of hundreds and hundreds of people that saw Him. Not just the disciples, not just 20, but hundreds of people that actually saw Jesus. So that's first and foremost. Second thing is Jesus was walking along, He had a plan for you and for me if you're a follower of Jesus. And so He looked at some of His followers and He said this, tell the 11 disciples, I want them to go to Galilee. I want them to go to a mountain. And so we're going to pick this up and I want to read this to you. This is Matthew chapter 28, verse 16. It says this, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. Continuing on verse 18, this is what Jesus said to them. He said this, then Jesus came to them and said, all right, guys, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, because of that, here's what I want you to do. You're to go. You're to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and then surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Now, next week, we're going to unpack that, and there's a lot of interesting things with it. But I want to bring one thing to you that you might have never thought about if you're a Christian. Christians all over the world know that passage. It's called the Great Commission. It is kind of like that charge to us to say that you are to tell others about Jesus. And many of us, we live that out. We tell our family, we tell our friends, we tell our work associates, and we embody the Great Commission. Some of us, we struggle with it. Some of us, we don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable. I get it. But I don't think any of us have really looked at the background and context for which Jesus said it. Because I believe, I'm going to take a leap here. Only Jesus knows. I can't speak for Him. But I do believe, based on Scripture, that when Jesus said to His disciples, go, He wasn't just talking about them as individuals. He was actually talking to them in the context that they are not alone because He is with them, but you are not alone because you have one another. You see, I believe the Great Commission was actually spoken to the church. It was spoken to bodies of Christ and the believers together. Because I believe that when you form a tribe, and you embody the Great Commission and what Jesus tells us, that something powerful happens. Far more than just us taking it on as ourselves. Now, that's important because we're going to get to it a little bit later in the service. But I want to tell you about a group of people that formed a tribe. They are many of your students here at our church. So several months ago, Pastor Jim and I, we announced a trip to Bulgaria. And we said, this is not just a general mission trip. This is not just for all students. These are for committed students who are serious about their faith and are willing to be challenged on the mission field to do things that they've never done before. And so we said, if you sign up, you're going to be pushed. So they blindly, and some of them say, I didn't realize I was signing up for this, they signed up. They raised support. They raised prayer partners. They raised support from their families. And about 2 weeks ago, we embarked on a journey to go to Bulgaria. The trip itself was absolutely incredible. But let me tell you what we were to do. There is a people group known as the Roma people in Europe. The Roma people are known by Americans and many others by another name, and they're known as the Gypsies. The Gypsies were a nomadic group that traveled all over. They lived for the moment. They lived for the day. And even in these Roma villages today, they have no concept of tomorrow. It is just wake up, and if you see something that can value you, you take it. If you see a meal that you can eat now, you take it. There's no concept of really putting a plan together for the next day, the next week, the next month. That is how this people group lives, and it's been generations. They also don't know a lot about Jesus. And in Bulgaria, there are many villages of Roma that the Bulgarian people shun and do not talk to and do not go near for safety reasons, and they don't want things of their own taken away from them. So the Roma people are all there, and no one is reaching them. So our group was challenged to go with other individuals and to go minister to the Roma people group in many different villages. And so that's what our kids trained for, prepared for. Now, this is all done under the name of Mission Possible. Mission Possible is an organization that I've partnered with for many years. It is 50 years old this upcoming year. They were ministering to Eastern Europe when the Iron Curtain was formed, those of you history buffs, and when the Iron Curtain was there, the USSR, the Soviet Union was in control, and no religion, no God was allowed to be spoken of, and so therefore Mission Possible made a way for people to see the Bible, read the Bible, understand who God is, and they continue to do that today. That was the organization that we partnered with, and we decided to go along with them on this journey. Now, in order to unpack this a little bit better, I'd like to introduce, for those of you who don't know, this is our missions pastor, and his name is Jim Sveringa. So Jim, why don't you come on out? Why don't you welcome Pastor Jim? And Pastor Jim, I just kind of got done giving the idea of our group, but I didn't tell them the kind of group we had. I told them that it was RUS, but it was actually more than that. So why don't you share with them how this trip and this idea came together and what was unique about the entirety of the group?
Sure. So as you already mentioned, you talked about how we went there last September, and we met with the Mission Possible leadership team there. And along there was also the leadership team from the Netherlands, the leadership team from Sweden, and from the U.S. And so as we talked about what we might be able to do as a church here in Ocean View, we said, what if we partner with our international partners, the Swedish, the Dutch, and the Bulgarians, and come together and put together a team that can reach the Roma people. And so that's why over the past 8 months we've been developing that team. And Sweden found about a group of 10 or 12 from their group. The Bulgarians had about 10 from their group. And the Netherlands couldn't make it this time, but we got together and formed a large group that was able to come together in this past week.
That created an interesting dynamic, and our parents were really excited about it because not only would our kids be going on mission, but they would also be partnered in a group with different cultures, that they would learn from other students from other cultures about how they view their relationship with God, which I will tell you, in some ways was very similar, in some ways was very, very different. So you talk about an amazing cultural exchange of ideas from a group. We thought, what if we got them together? Would God do something pretty incredible? And guys, I think you have some pictures and slides that you can throw up there that while we're talking a little bit about the mission. But as you kind of look at some of these pictures, and there's Mission Possible, and you'll see some more, Jim, we had a specific mission that as we gathered them together when we went to Bulgaria, the first 2 days we kind of had to study. So why don't you tell everybody about what we did those first couple days within the Doba America?
Sure, we broke it up for that. The first session in the morning was that the Sweden team was able to share with our team just a little bit more what it was to have a relationship with Jesus. And so they developed that a little bit more. Then you were the next message, and you came and talked to us about Matthew and what it means to go. And you really challenged them, as you're doing that with us now in this next week of tribes, is just what it means to work in your tribe and to go into different people to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And after that, we had another full day of just training what it means to be in a new culture, a different culture, and particularly the Roma people that we were with.
Yeah, I really loved how Mission Possible, they gathered us, and we all had an assignment. I had an assignment, and several of our other international partners did, and we were trying to prep these kids for what they're about to encounter. But one of the exciting things is, which the kids did not do, is two things. Number one, not only would they all be grouped together, but then they would also be split apart into two separate groups. You had Team Awesome, which was my team, which was the best team, the most incredible team, and then Pastor Jim, he had a separate team, which was average, which was okay. We'll accept them. And on each of those teams, we had individuals from Sweden, individuals from Bulgaria, individuals from the U.S., so within them. So they were split, and they were sent to different villages. But one of the things that I loved about this trip, which was probably different, Jim, than you or I have ever been on a team. Usually when you go out of country and you bring students, usually it's the adults who are the leaders and the students are just the worker bees. It's just tell us what to do and we'll go do it. We really, really wanted to empower these students to see if they could break out of their comfort zone. So what we did is we said, look, we're not only going to tell you what you need to do, but we're going to task you with running it. So there were three or four different categories. There was worship. We had worship teams in each group that had to sing songs, play songs, and lead worship for the Roma villages. And so our kids had to come up with worship songs. They had to have who's going to play guitar, who's going to sing what. They had to develop a song list, hand motions, dance moves, all by themselves, which they did. They also had to come up with craft ideas. And how are we going to do these crafts with the kids? And what are we going to teach them when we do these crafts? How are we going to point them to Jesus? And so they had to work together to figure out logistically, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? Then there were the sports aspect, like how do we maybe use sports, and what sport are we going to play, and how are we going to teach the kids about Jesus? And so they did an incredible job not only doing the tasks, but they also had to create those tasks and then execute those tasks, which was phenomenal. But Jim, they're tired of hearing me talk, and they really don't like hearing you talk. So what we'd like to do is we think that you'd be more interested in hearing maybe a couple of our students talk as well. So would you do me a favor and welcome to the stage. This is Joshua and Bella Gross. And just for really the most important thing, Bella was on Team Awesome, the best team, and Josh unfortunately had the privilege of working with Pastor Jim on the other team. So that being said, make sure we got their mics up. So let's start with Bella, because you're on Team Awesome. Bella, when you were tasked with like the assignments, and I know worship was one of the areas which obviously you're gifted in, and when you heard, okay, not only do I have to be on this team, but I also have to figure out how to do this. Why don't you walk through that process of the entire experience of getting worship together, but then also when you led worship on the field? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, leading worship was definitely an area where I grew a lot. I love to sing. I sing here on the platforms on some days, and I also sing at the Student Center on Wednesday nights. But the day we got to Bulgaria, I woke up pretty sick with a cough. I was coughing all the time. I could barely speak. And when I was asked to do worship, my first response was, no, I cannot sing. I would sound terrible, and I am all about perfection. I love sounding great. I do not like mistakes. But Pastor Terry talked me through that, and I was able to just sing and worship God, even though it was not my best work. But I learned a really valuable lesson of it's not about the quality. It's just about your willingness to say yes to God, and it's about your heart. God knows your heart, and other people's opinions don't matter. God's opinion is what matters the most, and it's about your willingness to just serve the Lord. So that was something that I really had to work on, and it was a really great lesson for me.
That's cool. I do have a follow-up question because there was a particular song that we sang over and over again.
Focus Men.
Yes, and I'm gonna have, that'll be in my head for the next 6 months. But can you tell me what was, just being up there and leading these kids in the song? If you wouldn't mind just, sharing some of the emotions that you went through when you were looking at them and mimicking, just tell us a little bit about that.
So with worship, we also learned a lot of kids' songs where we would dance and sing. One of our favorite songs was called Focus Men, which is God is with us. And the kids loved that song. The team loved the song. And what was really moving was to see when we started singing and dancing, they immediately followed along. And you could see the joy in their eyes. And it was really amazing to see. And they would always ask me, Bella, when are you going to dance next? When are we going to do Focus Men? And it was really nice to just see how excited they were about worship.
It was amazing. I loved seeing the kids light up around our students. They lit up a little bit toward me. They didn't light up toward Jim, but it's amazing. The students,
Why am I here?
what an effect they have on the kids is pretty incredible. Now, with that said, we also had worship, but then we also mentioned that we also had sports. And I know, Joshua, you're British, and I know all cultures, and so we call it football. The Americans call it soccer. But why don't you talk to them a little bit about your experience with the kids in playing football?
So I was on the better team with Jim, the one with the
Thank you,
better
brother.
villages, the better
Preach
team.
it, preach it.
So I was in charge of when we got to the villages leading football, the one where you kick the ball with your foot. All the kids loved that, and they didn't play it much, but they all knew how to play. So we didn't have to teach them or anything. We just separated them into teams and watched them go because they just enjoyed it so much. We were in 97-degree Fahrenheit weather. I mean, by all means, they should have been sitting on the side sweating. But no, they kept on going. There were no pauses or anything. They just kept on playing. It was fun to see them how much joy one simple game of football bring. I mean, it was crazy because even when we came back to the villages later that day, the first thing I'd hear from the boys is, football? And yes, we played football. It was fun to see how it affected them and how much they enjoyed it. Just one simple game of football could bring.
Yeah. I would say this, that having young men who love Jesus, and I will say, I know, Josh, you saw it as well with our Swedish team. Many of the young men who are 20-somethings and older teenagers, 20-somethings, their passion for Jesus. It was so important for these Roma kids to see male influences that actually are caring and gentle at times, which I know you guys exhibited, because that makes a drastic effect on their life because they don't usually see that from time to time within that people group. So they were charged with doing those aspects, and that was usually during the day, during a lot of heat, and that was to build relationships with them. And then every village that we visited, they knew that we were going to come back later in the day, and later in the evening when it was cooler, we were going to do a service, an outreach event to them. And that involved more worship, which I know Bella led as well. But then it also opened up a time for our young people to give a testimony. If you're new to Christianity, a testimony is basically telling your faith story. How did you come about knowing Jesus? What has Jesus done in your life? And how are you living for Jesus moving forward? And we challenged, as I mentioned before, these young individuals that they were going to have to step up and give their testimony. So Bella, let's start with you. When you were asked who's going to give their testimony, why don't you tell them what you felt like beforehand, what you felt like during, and what you felt like after?
Yeah. So when Pastor Terry asked if anyone wanted to give their testimonies, I said, yeah, sure. What do I do? I had never given my testimony before, but I was willing to try. So I wrote it out. I knew what I was going to say, and then I went up and I just stood up, waited for the crowd to gather. And slowly more people came until there were almost 300 people there. And by then I was really nervous. I was praying. I was like, Lord, please help me. Please give me peace. I was freaking out. I had never spoken in front of this many people before. But I look up, and then you can see all these beautiful mountains. And you could see the sun was just setting. And the sky had all these beautiful colors. And I just felt this sense of peace come over me. And it was so overwhelming. And then when I gave my testimony, all the right words came out, and it was perfect. There was not really other word to describe it. It was amazing.
That's really cool. That's amazing. Josh, how about you?
So before the testimony, as everyone else, I was a little nervous. Not as nervous as her, but 'cause I know her, but still a little nervous. During the testimony, I found most people in our group and the other team were about the same. It was growing up and being raised in a Christian family. And I know some of us thought, wow, how boring. We're all born and raised in a Christian family, like almost every single one of us there. But then we got told and we realized that that's one of the best things you can share with them, right? Being born and raised in a Christian family, because that's one of the best ways to grow up. So we shared our testimony. It came out fairly easily. Everyone on our team did a great job. I don't know about everyone else, but I know the kids got it and heard the word from Jesus and what they needed to hear. I know we spread that in different ways because everyone's story is unique, though it may not be entirely different. Everyone has a unique story in life that they've lived with Jesus, with struggles, because not everything's going to be perfect, of course. You don't go through life and every fortune comes your way. No, that's not how it works. But with Jesus, life is better because you have confidence in him. And I just found it to be nice to tell the kids that, and that they got it as well. They were listening. Some of them were just paying very close attention, and they knew, I know the words were going through their head, and they thought about it. And I know maybe right now they're thinking about it, and it's going through them, and they're living with it.
That's great. One of the things we taught our kids when they gave their testimony is that actually one of the most powerful testimonies you can give is the fact that you grew up in a Christian home, because again, the people group that you're ministering to, many of them don't know who Jesus is. And so it was inspirational for them to see kids who, that's all you know is Jesus. That's all I've lived my life with knowing is that Jesus is the Son of God. So it was really, really powerful. After we got done with our testimonies, then myself, Pastor Jim was pushed out of his comfort zone because he had to stand up in front of 600 people. And he would tell you this, he could do it flawlessly, but it's not his favorite thing to do, to be able to stand and speak in front of that many individuals. But he had to go ahead and do that. And we both were charged with sharing who Christ is, and then challenging the people to accept Christ if they'd like to. And so at the end of the messages, what we would do is we would say, if you would like to accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, we just encourage you to raise your hand. And so I know in our group, Bella, and I'll start with you, that first night that we had the sun was setting in the Rosina village, or in that village, and then in the village in Rosina afterwards, we also saw many hands, too many to count. And you were charged with, when you see that, you had to go and you had to pray for them. So why don't you tell everybody about that experience of having to go to pray with someone, and anything else you'd like to share along with that?
Yeah, so before I get into praying for people, I just want to share, the first day we got there was this little girl, her name was Deanna, and we met eyes, and she gave me the biggest smile I've ever seen, and she ran up to hug me, and she did not leave my side for the rest of the day. When I came back again that night, she latched onto me. She was the sweetest little girl. And then that night, when Terry asked if there was anyone who wanted to accept Jesus into their heart, she raised her hand, and she immediately looked over at me. And so I went over and I prayed for her. However, she only spoke Bulgarian. And so I was going through my head, like, how can I help? I just speak English. She won't understand me. But after I prayed for her, she gave me this big hug, and it was like she knew exactly what I said. Even though I didn't speak her native language, it was like God spoke to her and spoke through me, and it was a really great feeling. And we did that for a lot of people. Another girl, she had a tumor. She looked maybe my age. She asked for prayer, for healing, for peace, and we prayed for her, and she ended in tears. And even though it was in English, she only understood Bulgarian. I think she really did understand what was going on, and I think it really did speak to her. And then another thing that touched me was the baby boxes. We were giving out baby boxes which had all sorts of
So Bella, let me
baby
explain baby boxes before you go in. So baby boxes are in the Roma villages, in which Bella will tell you about a home. She went and visited a home of a mom with 8 children. That mom was probably in her 30s. In the Roma villages, at the age of 12 and 13, usually an older man will come and take them for a wife, and they will have many, many children. And so one of the ways that we build relationships with the Roma people is that the new moms, we will bring a box of supplies and resources for newborns, clothes, diapers, all kinds of resources for them, and deliver it to their home. And our kids, our whole U.S. team, along with Bella, after that outreach event, had the privilege of walking into a home. So let's see.
So there was this one mother, like Terry talked about, who had 8 children. I think she said she was about 27, so she was still really young. And she had a newborn who was only 2 weeks. And the eldest sister was taking care of the child. And she welcomed us into her house, which was no smaller than maybe this carpet. And there were 8 kids running around, 1 small couch, and then on the ceiling, there were 2 strings that were attached. And one of the Bulgarian leaders asked her, "What is that? Could you show us what that is?" And she got a blanket and she wrapped it around the 2 strings and she put the baby inside. And she said that was the baby's bed. And she said sometimes she has to put the baby on the floor because sometimes she can't hold it up. So that really moved me, that how much I take for granted, how fortunate I am, and how I don't even know it sometimes. And you could see how happy she was. The kids were happy, she was happy, she was smiling, and it was beautiful that she was so happy and joyful even though she didn't have much, and that really touched me. So
I love too is before our kids left, they had the privilege of praying God's blessing upon their home and upon their family, that our students had the opportunity to lead at times in those homes, which was pretty incredible. So thank you, Bella. Joshua, how did you feel when you had to walk over and pray for someone in that experience, someone raising their hand and wanting to receive Christ? Tell us about that experience.
So about 3/4 of our team spoke English, right? And then we're praying for the Roma people who speak Bulgarian. You'd think there'd be a language barrier in which it's hard to pray for them. But then there's the question of, does God need a language barrier? I don't think so. No, you can pray to God in English, and you know, even the person you're praying for, they know they're being prayed for, whether it not be in their language, they're being prayed for in the right things, even if they don't know what it is specifically that they're talking about, what they're wishing for, that for their healing, for their saving. If we're bringing them to Jesus, they may not know, but God does, and that's all that matters, right? Because that's all you need. Because God has a plan for every single one of us, whether it be unique, with similarities, or completely the same. Everybody has a plan, and whether they know it or not, praying for them just helps talk to God, saving them, just bringing them closer to Him, which was the goal, right? That was the mission. Bring people closer to God, bring people to Him so they can know Him and spend time with Him. And I think we did that with prayer, especially in that amount of people. There were a lot. I'd never done that before. I'd only prayed for like maybe max 5 people at a time, but going from one group to another, and it felt like upwards of half an hour and just kept on going. It wasn't tiring at all. It just felt like we were doing something. It felt like we were making a difference, and I believe we did. So,
Bella, I have a final question for you. I'm going to throw a wild card question at you. In the group, there are many times when we would ask for volunteers, or we would say, hey, someone needs to go do this, and there would be hesitancy. Talk about the dynamic of your U.S. team along with the Swedish team and the Bulgarian team, and how you guys in those moments encouraged one another. What effect did that have on your confidence in that process?
yeah, so a lot of times, like Pastor Terry said, there was a lot of hesitancy. I think we were all scared because it was way out of our comfort zone. It was something we'd never done before, and so a lot of us were nervous. What if we mess up? What if we don't do it right? What if, people think I'm weird? What if people judge me? All of the things. And it was a great growing experience for all of us. But one thing I really liked is when one person stood up, so at another person, a lot of how Tara talked about was making disciples. And making disciples is a lot about leading by example, the way Jesus did. And so when one of us would do something, another person would feel comfortable to do it. And then so at another person, and it was like a chain effect. And when you led by example, a lot of other people followed, and that was really nice.
That's awesome. I love, Bella, what you said, that chain reaction. And I'm going to wrap things up with Pastor Jim to talk about his experience in a second, but I want to seize on something you said. We started this message, unique message, by saying that maybe God intended for us to embody the Great Commission through the essence of a tribe. And I think you just heard Bella articulate why. Because God knew it would be difficult on our own. That maybe isolated and by ourselves, we wouldn't have the courage or the fortitude or the strength to do something. But when you are with a tribe, and that tribe says, you can do it, Bella. You can do it. Or someone says, I'll be the first. Then it makes it that much easier for the second to follow. It shows the importance of what God can do through the context of community and the essence of community. God took 7 teenagers who probably did not think they could do half of what we asked them to do. And now, coming back, I would look at the both of you and say, if another opportunity came for you to give your testimony or to lead in worship, or do you have any fear whatsoever to do something like that in the future?
Easy.
No.
And I think, it chokes me up, but I think that's the beauty of a tribe. They went together. They saw God move, and they're changed forevermore. I know I'm changed. And Jim, I'm going to leave it to you, and then I'm going to ask you to pray for our time at the end. But when we were on this trip, and we were in separate groups, Team Awesome and Team Subpar, but while we were, I know for me, I thought to myself, this is by far the best team that I've ever been a part of in all the mission trips I've ever taken in my life. And I know our Bulgarian leader in 30 years of Mission Possible said, this is my favorite team because of what God's doing in this group of young people. Jim, you were with the IMB, International Mission Board, for 24 and a half years. Why don't you share with them your experience and how you found this group and this trip?
Well, I think what's different about this group, and it's an amazing group, and what's different about them is that we were all working from different countries and different cultures together, having one goal, one purpose, one focus, and to share the love of Jesus Christ with these kids. And I have not seen that in a long time. Usually when church goes, they want to take ownership, and their chest puffs out that we're doing this, we got these many people giving their lives to Christ. But this is more of a humble group that we want to serve. We wanted to work alongside Mission Possible, who was working alongside the local church planters and churches there in these villages, and that was just amazing to see. And the last day for us is that we had, in our group amazing, we had a visit with our team, which was made up of the U.S., Bulgaria, Sweden. We also had 10 students, high school students, come from the Roma village and just sit and talk with us. And as I was talking to the leader, Ivo, from Mission Possible, I said, Ivo, this is what comes to my mind, is when I see this group of people coming together like this. It's come from Revelation. It says, after this I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hand, and they were shouting with a great roar, salvation comes from our God, who sits on the throne, and from the Lamb. And it just hit me that we were sitting there with all these different cultures, and we're just a small little glimpse of what this is going to look like, as Revelation talks about. And that was just amazing for me to be a part of that.
That was great. Well, thank you guys for sharing. And don't you appreciate these amazing young individuals? You can stay. You can stay. And Pastor Jim, in order to close our time, I would just ask for you to close our time in prayer.
Sure. Let's pray. Father, you are an amazing God, and we serve an amazing God because we've seen you do some amazing things here the past 2 weeks in these Roma villages and with these students, Father. What you've done in their lives and what you're going to continue to do in their lives, we can tell it's going to be some amazing things as well. We thank you for the opportunity for us as Ocean View to be able to partner with Mission Possible and other organizations like this, but particularly Mission Possible in Eastern Europe, where we can come alongside them and support them both financially and physically and spiritually, Lord, as we lift up their arms, as we just continue to encourage them in their work. But as they reach these Roma people, Father, with the gospel, we just ask you to continue the work that they're doing there, that we can go back there and continue to be a part of what they're doing. Lord, we just ask you to be with them as the winter comes, as the winter months come, that these families will have warm clothes to have on their backs, that they can have food to eat, and that these babies can have just a little bit of food and clothes for them for the winter. We ask you, Father, now that you'll continue to work in the lives of these kids and the lives of the kids that go forward as they continue to share with what's going on in their lives, what God has been doing in their lives the past couple weeks.